educational and artistic pursuits, and is on the executive committee board of the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and so on and so forth. Let me welcome today my friend and my brother, Osagie Imasogie. A lot of the people who were coming on, is that fella? I say fella non you. Yeah, most welcome, my brother.
Ituah, you have been too kind and generous with the work. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting. Sorry, we had a bit of a mix-up. You were supposed to come last year, but somehow we got the dates a bit confused. But I think it's just best that we start off with you in this brand new year. And we're speaking on the nature of reality, trying to see what the real issues are, not just mainly in our great country, Nigeria, and we'll then touch on other parts of the world if we have enough time. The nature of reality, what really is going on in our country, Nigeria, what is real, what is imagined, what is true, and how did we get to where we are. Maybe a good starting point is parts of what the president spoke about. I don't know if you watched that interview or bits and pieces of it, where he said certain things and so on and so forth. From where you stand, my brother, what do you think is going on in Nigeria, and how did we get to where we are at this present point in time?
Ituah, again, thank you for inviting me. What I'm excited about is that my understanding is that this is a dialogue. So that is where we can get the most insight. So I look forward to the dialogue and the Q&A that comes from that. So part of the reason why I suggested a phrase or a topic to talk about as the nature of reality is that I think we need to pause as Nigerians who care about our country and actually ask ourselves, what is the nature of reality? You know, one of the things that we take for granted is that there's anything that is real. We create reality. Reality is created from our conception, our perception. So for instance, right now, we're all on this medium. Well, this medium did not exist independent of the human mind and the human creativity. So the internet was created by human thoughts. The computer was the product of the human mind. The clothes we're wearing are product of the human mind. So the nature of reality is that we create reality. And I don't think we reflect on that sufficiently. I mean, even if you think about it from the point of view of the scriptures, you know, that people think that there's just one creation story in the scriptures, actually many. And one of the ones that I enjoy is John 1, where it's stated that the Word, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. So even in the scripture, the concept of creation was a concept, and it was a word that was uttered that created reality. So the reason this is so important from my perspective is that when we talk about Nigeria, we cannot talk about Nigeria absent or different from our concept of the country. Nigeria doesn't exist independent of us. It's a product of our mind. And so we need to go and take a hard look at that. The deep philosophy of the Yoruba people is one that I have fallen madly in love with. And the philosophical statement is that if you see a cripple and you complain that the load on his head is warped, the problem is not with his head, it's with his feet. It essentially means we need to think about fundamental issues. So when you think about the nature of reality as to Nigeria, you actually need to think back to 1914. Because again, it was a concept. It was a concept. And that concept was created by colonialists. Now, colonialism is an extraordinarily efficient model. It really does work. And we have concrete evidence to that effect. And if you think about the fundamental concept of colonialism, it is that the colonialists exploit the colonized. And that is the basic economic model. And when they exploit it, they're primarily interested in raw materials and cash crop. And another feature of colonialism is that the colonizers take those resources out of the colony. They take it to a foreign country.
Let me try. Okay. Unfortunately, I won't be able to do the interview alone, so let me just try to call. Okay.
You are muted. I don't know who muted you and who is interrupted us.
Okay, I'm on mute.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. Someone must.
You didn't touch it. I know. It's a colonialist that did it.
So I was talking about the fundamental elements of this extraordinarily efficient system, colonialism. So the colonialists, they take raw materials out of the colony. They take those raw materials to a foreign country. The raw materials they're interested in are natural products and cash crops, minerals, and the like. And so from a colonialist perspective, the value of the colony is its raw material. The negative portion of the colony are its people, because it's the people that prevented them from exploiting all the minerals of the cash crops. So that's the colonial mindset. That's the model. And that's what happened in 1914. So when we talk about the nature of reality of our country was structured as a colonial structure. The question we should ask ourselves is this. In 1960, what actually happened? I would posit that the colonizers changed, but not the colonial system. We kept the concept. Remember the features of a colonial structure? You are interested in what? Raw materials.
Raw materials.
Today, most people in positions of authority, what are they interested in? The raw materials, the oil, the gas, the gold, that, okay? The cash crops. And then what is the other feature? You exploit that and take it out of the country. Well, most of our guys have, assets out of the country. And what was the third feature? The people were the problem. So the nature of reality is the concept of what we have created. If we do not, as the Yoruba philosophers have pointed out, if we don't look at the feet of the cripple, we can't move forward. We need to engage with a conceptual discussion as to what Nigeria is. Nigeria does not exist independent of us. And unless we fundamentally change the concept of colonialism, then we will not have any fundamental change in Nigeria. Achebe said that a colonized mind is a frightful thing to behold. And it may seem strange to people that I'm talking about colonialism because we think that is behind us, but actually it's not. And unless we change that fundamental orientation and thereby create a new reality, unless we do that, as Yorubas would say, we're just pouring water into a basket and not moving forward. So we have to grapple with that. So let me make one more comment and then, let's continue the dialogue. Because everything is conceptual, because we create our own reality from our minds, when I say we continue the colonial system, I've given you some good examples, but let me give you even a more practical example. So if you work for a company or an institution and you decide the institution asks you to travel on business or on behalf of the institution, it will make perfect sense for the institution to pay for your cost of travel, to pay for your accommodation when you get there, and to pay for your feeding. I mean, that's because you are working on behalf of the institution. So back to our colonial structure. If you are the British Foreign Office and you're selling a colonial officer to the colony, of course you will pay for the transportation of the colonial officer, you will pay for his accommodation, and you will pay for his feeding. Now, if you want to be really efficient, and you know you're going to be sending several colonial officers, and you know that they're going to stay there for a period of time, it makes logical sense that instead of you paying hotel bills every time or paying for car hire every time, it will make sense for you to build a house because it's cheaper for you. It's an efficient thing for you to do. And instead of you paying for restaurant bills, it will make sense for you to hire a steward and a cook to provide food for that colonial officer. Now, ultimately, this is how we created our GRAs, our government reservation areas. They were a colonial infrastructure to support the colonial activities of the colonialists. It made economic sense from a colonial perspective. Now, that same colonial officer, when he or she gets back to London, do you know how they get home? They jump on a bloody bus. And you know the flight they're going to? It's not the government paying for it. And the meal, the fish and chips that they will buy on the way home, they're paying for it out of their own pockets. The reason is simple. They are no longer traveling on behalf of the British government. Now they are home. What did we do in 1960? We stepped into the shoes of the colonialists. We kept all of our GRAs, plus all the infrastructure, the house, the car, the driver, the cook. But wait a minute, we're doing this while we are home. It makes no sense whatsoever, unless you are keeping and operating the colonial system. And if you are a colonialist that simply stepped into those shoes, makes perfect sense. So this is part of the problem. We have not, we have not really sat down to think through what we are doing. We've been operating a paradigm. We just stepped into the shoes of the colonialists and we continued with it. And then we are surprised. You cannot plant corn and harvest yam. It's just not possible. We are surprised. What are we surprised about? This is the end product of a colonial system. It works. So I think we need to pause, take a deep breath, and engage in a dialogue about what's the nature of reality. What is it that we are saying? What is it? What is Nigeria? And unless we dismantle our mindset as a colonial structure, it's very unrealistic for us to expect a different outcome. You cannot plant corn and harvest yam. So that's just the kind of way I tend to view reality.
Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. So down with the GRAs, down with the COEs, and things like that.
You can have lovely areas. I have no problems with that.
Yes.
But the point in issue is you should have it not from a colonialist perspective.
Yes.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit more about that, Ituah. The colonial thought process affects everything we do. How we treat our domestic staff, how we view people who are different from us, what we consider to be valuable, how we define success, and ultimately, and this is the part that I am shocked that enough of us do not really realize, ultimately, how we see ourselves. Because it is the way we see ourselves that we will treat ourselves. And so I do think we need to pause and really deeply reflect on what we're doing, on what is reality. We create reality. And the reality we've created is the one we are currently living. We are a fabulously wealthy country. Fabulous, I mean, stupendously wealthy country. And people say, but Fela, how can you say that? Look at where we are. Africa, as my good friend Kawala would say, Africa is not poor, it's just poorly run. We just decide this is what we're doing. This is a choice. We can change this if we want to. No one has a gun to our head. So it's that let us pause and think that I think has been missing. And we delude ourselves that this ultimately does not affect the way we see ourselves. Look at the way we treat ourselves. Look at the way we treat our fellow Nigerians. We act as colonialists. And then we see someone that is non-Nigerian and we want to give them special treatment. Why? How does that make sense? Oh, you're a colonialist in your mind. You've been convinced that simply by the level of melanin in someone's skin, they should be treated better? Are you serious? And this is the problem. This is the mental challenge that we have to grapple with.
So how do we begin to restructure and reconstruct all this? How do we have a position, a movement, a person or so or the other, you know, because you've really hit on very, very fundamental issues and not something a lot of people have really thought deeply about. And I can see that you really, really thought deeply about this and all that. So what, in your own view and opinion, do we now need to do to begin this reconstruct and rethinking? That's one. Then two, how has that affected our economy? Because people may dare say that when the colonialists were running our economy, £1, one Nigerian pound was superior to the British pound. And even up until 1978, when I left Nigeria for the first time, the naira had come in then, and 1 naira was equivalent to almost £1 and $2 at that time. You could change it at even at the black market, the rate was very advantageous. So why our economy seemed to be okay up until that time, or at least up until the British left. And they were colonialists and they ran the economy as colonialists. So why has the economy depreciated so much? And how do we engage this reconstruct going forward?
By the way, I think some people are not on mute, so I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah,
so
there's the feedback.
People can be on mute unless they're speaking. That would be helpful because it would make it easier for everybody.
In it, I think, yeah, if you can mute.
Okay.
Is this better?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay.
All right. Ituah, you've raised two very good questions. The first one is, how do we start the reconstruction? And the second one is, hey, when the colonialists were here, or the obvious colonialists were here, we had a better economy. I mean, those are the two questions in essence. All right, so let's deal with the first one. With all due respect, I really have to commend you for hosting these kind of discussions. The way we start, because I fundamentally believe that the nature of reality is something that we create, that is to put out of our mind. So the only way we can do the reconstruction is by having this kind of discussion. A frank discussion amongst ourselves, where we are not lying to ourselves, to thyself be true, and where we're dealing with the fundamental conceptual framework that leads to what we call Nigeria. Again, I must emphasize, none of these things exist. There's no such thing as Nigeria. It was a made-up thing, ostensibly named by someone's common law wife, whatever that is. So it's just a concept. There's no such thing as America. It's nothing but a concept. There's no such thing as England, nothing but a concept. These things don't exist outside. They do not exist independent of your mind. So the way we start the reconstruction is by having this kind of dialogue and being truthful to ourselves and looking at the fundamentals and re-examining what that means. I'm going to come back to that, but that is the short answer to that first question. To the second question, I'm going to give you an extreme example just to make my point on the second question, and then I will delve into it a bit more. You know, during the period of apartheid in South Africa, the quality of life of a white South African was fantastic, was better than most people who lived in Europe or in America. Great hospitals, great roads for where they went, amazing restaurants for where they ate, water and light. But that was supporting less than 5% of the population. And the rest of the population lived in abject poverty. So if you talk to a white South African who lived during the period of apartheid, that was a great time. And now it's much worse. The nature of colonialism is that it's very, very, very good for a very, very, very small percentage of people. That's the nature of the structure. And if you talk to those who lived, who were in that very, very small percentage, obviously it's a much better life than when more of the resources have to be used by more of the people. So that's the first thing, just to understand that they say, when we look back with rosy pictures about a better life, sometimes it's a better life for whom? It's the same challenge that America is having right now, when Trump and his followers say they want to get America back. Back from what? Oh, from the 50s? From the 50s, when you could legally discriminate against people that look like me. So that was a better life. Yeah, better life for you, but not for me. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. The second thing is this. Let us be crystal clear about the nature of colonialism. As I said, it's an extraordinarily efficient model. So if a colonialist built a road, why do you think he built the road? Because of love of the people? No, because the road allows him to go into the hinterland and harvest cash crops or minerals. If a colonialist built a GRA, why do you think he did it? Because he loved Lagos or Enugu or Kanu? No, he needed accommodation for his staff. So the infrastructure that was built and that was efficiently maintained was maintained to support that colonialist structure. It made perfect sense to do that. Why wouldn't you? Look at our railway system. Our railway system is completely designed to move goods from the north to the south, and to move coal from Enugu to the south. It wasn't designed in terms of what is the best thing for Nigeria. It was what was the best thing for the colonial structure at that time. So the problem that we've had is that when we stepped into the shoes of the colonialist, because we were aping them, we were copying them, we actually had not thought through the full picture. It was the office, the title, it was the perks, the cars and the drivers. Those are the things that were attractive to us. But our role, we never actually said, what is this system? And how does the system function? So what has happened over time is that colonial system has degenerated. And we don't even think through what we're doing. Why in the world? Anyone that understands anything about transportation, anything, will tell you that road transportation does not compete with barges, does not compete with air. It's a system, does not compete with rail. So you use your rail to handle heavy duty products. You use your trucks to do short delivery. You use your barges to move things upriver. It's a whole system. They're not competing with each other. But if you haven't thought it through, you might think that, oh, because I'm a trucker, I'm going to kill rail network in the country because I see it as competition. Actually, it's not competition, but you are ignorant. You don't understand the system you're operating, and therefore you've degenerated. And that's why, to a large extent, our economy has gone where it is. Let me give you 2 more points on that. So the period you were referring to, Ituah, when the obvious colonialists were in control. And you said, well, the pound, the naira was stronger, blah, blah, blah. Remember also at that time, what was the nature of Nigeria's economy? Remember those stories of pyramids of peanuts, of groundnuts? Remember the huge amount of cola we used to export? Remember all these things? Nigeria's economy was multifaceted. That made sense from a colonial perspective because you want multiple shots on goals. But those who stepped into the shoes of the colonialists did not even understand the system they were operating. And today, we have this absolute madness. In terms of foreign exchange, over 90% of Nigeria's foreign exchange comes from what? Oil. In terms of GDP, gross domestic product, what actually happens in Nigeria? Over 90% does not come from oil. Let me repeat that. Over 90% of our foreign exchange comes from oil, and yet oil represents less than 10% of our actual GDP. This is madness. This is sheer madness, because it means that we have completely misaligned our economy. Do you know what the bulk of Nigerians do in the economy? They do agriculture. Do you know how much, look at our current budget. You know how much we put into agriculture? 5%, 6%. How much we put into the civil service? How much we put into the armed forces? It's not possible. These are not theoretical discussions. It's just practical. We've completely misaligned our economy. And then we are surprised that the economy has difficulty. What do you expect it to do? I mean, how? If we're not investing in where the majority of Nigerians operate, what do you expect to happen? This is ridiculous. So my point is that it is these kind of discussions we need to have. The fact that Nigeria has the largest GDP on the continent of Africa, I think I'm dating myself now. I think it was Babangida during one of his terms that he was president that said on national TV that he couldn't believe that the economy was still surviving. That was decades ago. And this is the largest economy in Africa. Do you know what that tells you? That in spite of every effort to destroy it, somehow the will of the Nigerian people, the drive of the Nigerian people continues to provide and produce some level of value. One last comment on that. So the child who never left his father's farm thinks it's the biggest in the world. You know, the GDP that Nigeria has, that is the biggest in Africa, is under $500 billion. This week, Apple got a market cap of 3 trillion. T for Tom. Apple, a peasant company, has a market cap of $3 trillion. So what is it that is making people happy again? I'm confused. Nigeria's GDP is less than the turnover of Walmart. Walmart has a turnover of over $600 billion. Again, I'm confused. What are we talking about? What is making people happy? What is exciting them? What? 400 billion in GDP for a country of 200 million people? Are you serious? So yeah, our economy today is not as good as, quote unquote, it was before, but that has 100% to do with our vision of our country. That has 100% to do with how we've chosen to live our lives. Who else is influencing it? Who else can influence it? And oh, by the way, who can change it? What? A Martian, you know, a green person, some kind of miracle? How is it going to change? So I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm not very bright. I get easily confused. And the reality is that I know that you cannot plant corn and harvest yam. If you want yam, you better plant yam. Last comment about the economy, since you raised the economy. Remember my earlier comment that as to the nature of reality, we create our own reality? The way you structure your economy affects your mind. So let me make it crystal clear. If your economy is agrarian, so before we became a monocultured economy that only depended on oil, before then, when we had a broad-based economy, which is still what our GDP is, by the way. Do you know what that means? So agriculture means what? You have to find land that is appropriate. You have to clear the land. You have to plant. You have to tender the crop. You have to ultimately harvest. You have to sell, and then you start the cycle all over again. So if your economy is agrarian, guess what that means? Your mind thinks in a longer time frame. Because everything I've just said takes time. And if your economy is agrarian, your mind thinks strategically. How do I get my crops to the market? How do I do this? How do I do that? On the other hand, if your economic interest is, hey, oil, the bulk of Nigeria's oil is offshore. The vast majority of the 200 million Nigerians have never seen oil. They've never physically seen crude oil. They don't know what it even looks like. So if I'm going to sit down in my house and get 5 cents or 10 cents on every barrel of oil that is lifted, how do you think that affects my mind? The only thing I need to think about is how do I continue to get access to the ability to get my rent from the oil? I don't have to think strategically about land, about timing. My concept of time is shorter. If I get on my private jet and I leave, I'm a happy camper. I have no problems. So your question on the economy is very important, because if we think through what should be important in our economy, it will affect our thinking as to how we govern ourselves. Because if I'm a farmer, if I invest in agriculture, I need political stability. I need water. I need electricity. I need a road network. I need constant telecommunication. All those things are important to me if I'm an investor in agriculture, if I'm a capitalist. But if I'm not, they are not important. And therefore, I will not put resources behind it. So the economy is a complex issue. It doesn't exist independent of us. It's, again, a product of our minds.
So what do we do going forward? And if you were God, and if you were able to do certain things with all the knowledge that you have, how would you advise Nigerians, okay, to now change their thinking and change their actions? And what actions do they now need to take to move us from where we are now to where we really should be? What would be your pieces of advice as we are now to the average Nigerian? And in view of the fact that 2023, that magical year seems to be on the door, what would you then do?
Three things. Number one, because I really believe the nature of reality is a product of your mind, I cannot re-emphasize it. We have to start with that conceptual discussion. We need to have frank discussions with ourselves. We should not lie to ourselves. And we need to understand the system that we're operating. Number two, Yoruba sọ pé Akpalara. It's a wonderful philosophical perspective, which means that your only two relations are your two hands. Relation one, relation two. The only way we can make change is if we make the change. There is no third party. There is no Jupiter that is going to come. There's no one cares about you. No one cares about us except us. Let's stop this illusion that somehow one NGO or one foreign government or why should they care about you? On what basis? The fact that we even think in that term is a reflection of the colonialized mind. Why should there be a they that will come, they will solve it? Who's they? We have to decide what we're going to do. Colonialism is not sustainable by physical cohesion. Let me explain. Let me repeat that and let me explain. To establish colonialism, you use force. But you cannot sustain it just on force. Remember, the whole period that Nigeria was a British colony was less than 60 years. That's it. That's it. We've been, quote unquote, independent of England for roughly the same period of time that we were a British colony. So why are we still functioning as a colonist? Because the only way colonialism survives is if it sits in the mind of the colonized. Violence starts it, but cannot sustain it. What sustains it is that the colonized accept to be colonized. And one of the first things that happens in that process of changing the mind of the colonized is the removal of agency. In other words, the colonizers convince the colonized that there's nothing they can do, that this is the state of play, that they are powerless, there's nothing they can do. So they remove their agency, they remove their ability to affect and change their own lives. And what that then leads to is a second, even more insidious situation. Because now the colonized have been convinced that there's something they can do. Therefore, this is the more insidious one. They are not responsible for their plight. Because there's something they can do. So they're not responsible. So it strips you, it makes you naked of your ability to affect and change your own life. And once you believe that, once that enters your mind, then the logical thing for you then is to say, oh boy, can I get some and take it abroad as a quintessential colonialist? Can I take care of just myself as a quintessential colonialist? I'm going to leave those natives to themselves as a quintessential colonialist. So the removal of agency is one of the most insidious effects of the colonized mind. If we want to make a change, we have to take our agency back. We have to understand what the Yorubas have said, Apalara. We have to understand that we are the only ones that can make a change, and that it's our country. The third thing. So scientists tell us that the universe is approximately 14.8 billion years old. They tell us that the Earth as a planet is roughly 4.5 billion years old. They tell us that humanoids, in other words, creatures that walk on 2 feet and have 2 hands, are roughly 300,000 years old. Let me say that again. The universe is roughly 14.8 billion years. The Earth itself is roughly 4.5 billion years. And humanoids, animals that look like us, because that's what we are animals, are roughly 300,000 years old. So in the scope of the universe and the Earth, we are very recent. And then they say Homo sapien. Now, don't forget, there were different types of hominids. So there were different types of creatures like us. But Homo sapien, which is where we derive from, that we are roughly 160,000 years old. Okay. So again, in the scheme of things, it's not even a second. Our existence is nothing. Here's what is interesting. You know what the scientists say? Why is it out of all the hominoids that existed, why is it that it was Homo sapien that survived? We were not the strongest. We were not the fastest. Actually, we didn't have the biggest brains. Do you know what scientists claim is the reason that Homo sapiens were the ones that survived from all the other hominoids? It was our ability to work together, our ability to cooperate and work together, our ability to hunt as a group strategically, which ultimately led for us moving from the hunter-gatherer to establishing communities and domesticating animals and domesticating a grass that became rice, and so on and so forth. So what made Homo sapiens survive was our ability to cooperate. But that's my third point. We have to know, and we have to work on cooperating with ourselves. If we don't do that, this is what made us survive. If we don't do that, it's almost impossible. So if you want to carry a heavy load, you are the first to bend down. And then other people will come and say, Ituah is trying to carry this load, let us help him carry it. We have to learn how to cooperate with each other. And one of the best ways of thinking about that is the Yoruba three-level proverb, which I love, philosophical perspective, which Ituah, you and I have talked about this before, which has to do with the hand. I love it very much because it's so practical and it's so deep in its philosophical understanding. And essentially the Yoruba's philosophers realized something. But if you look at our hands, there are three levels to this philosophical perspective. There's something very unique. Each of our digits, each of our fingers is independent. And every one of them is different. Not a single finger is the same length as the other. So Olodumare has already given us diversity and independence in our hands. The second part of it is, what is it that holds your fingers together? Oh, it's your palm. Did you ever realize, did you ever notice, did you ever think about the fact that your palm is actually bigger than your individual fingers? So what can hold your diversity together is something bigger than you. And that could be a philosophy, that could be an objective, that could be a business, that could be a community, but something that is bigger than you, that can hold you together, even though you are independent and even though you are different. Here's the third part of the proverb. When is your hand the most powerful? It's when it's either a fist or a handshake. In both instances, all your fingers and your palm work together. So let us build hands. Let us cooperate. Let us have our independent thoughts, our independent ethnicity, our independent philosophies, but let us hold it together with a common purpose. And then let's turn that into both a fist and a handshake. So very practical. Now, let's be clear about this. Let's be crystal clear about this. Why will a colonialist give this up? You think we're gonna, do we really think we're going to talk them out of this? That's totally unrealistic. So it's not a strategy that you depend on someone just deciding that they're going to do the right thing. There's no they, it's us. And we have to be determined to do this, which means on a practical basis, Ituah, it means across the board. We must be doing this in politics, in active politics. We need to engage. We must be doing this in the civil service. We must be doing this on the business side. We must be doing this in the professions. We must be doing this in the arts. There's not a single facet of our, in academia, there's not a single facet of our community that can be excluded. Because it's our country, it's our world, it's our reality. And unless we do that, we can't change. How else can we change? So those would be my 3 points as to very practical how we move forward. Is it easy? Of course not. Why should it be? Look at the history of every single country in the world. And oh, by the way, let me say something. And what I'm going to say is not elitist. It's not. It's just what history tells us. Every country, this effort was led by the privileged. Those of you on this call. In every country. The Russian Revolution was led by some of the wealthiest, most privileged people. because you are in positions of authority, you have access to resources, you can organize, you can think strategically. So the man who's pushing Amalanke is trying to make a bloody living. You think he has time for this? But if you structure something and you rally them, yeah, maybe for a moment there. So the burden of your success is that you have the flip side responsibility to provide leadership.
Are you talking about me?
Everyone on the call, you're doing your piece also.
I think for laughing. That's a good one. Yeah, right. I think you really touched on some very, 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 very critical and illuminating things. And honestly, I don't think even any one of our present leaders, even past and present, had this thinking. I don't think so. I'm sorry. I don't think so. Maybe one came close, just to the one. But a lot of the others, they don't have this thinking. They didn't realize that they were stepping into colonial shoes. They didn't realize they were continuing a colonial practice that would take us nowhere. For example, just this last week, IMF is telling us again that we have to devalue our naira. We have to change our interest rates. And every time we have an issue, they say, let's go to the World Bank, let's go to the IMF. And I keep telling them that these people are not interested in really solving your problem. They're not, they were not created to solve your problem. They were created to see how they can still take some kind of advantage of you, unwillingly or willingly. So going back to them all the time is begging the issue, because they really don't see it from your perspective. Maybe I'd like you to speak to that. And also, why is it that a lot of our leaders that we have had have not been able to think this way? And why is it that we're just unable to cooperate? I mean, even this same colonialists, one of the things, the seeds that they sowed was to create division and make it almost impossible for you to have this cooperation that we're talking about. They called the Hausa man, they whispered into his ears. They called the Yoruba man, they spoke some things to him. They pulled the Igbo aside, they threatened him and told him certain things. And they made sure that, like Chinua Achebe said, all things fell apart, and the center, the palm, could not hold. So what do we do? How do we now reorganize this and work together and put this feast out? And maybe the first thing to punch is the colonial face. Sorry. What do we do?
So two things about international institutions. You know, who doesn't know the trick of keeping the meat in your mouth and looking for it? These institutions are set up to achieve a certain objective. They are very efficient in doing that. When it's about right? If not for the fact that the wall cracked, the wall gecko could not enter. Unfortunately, the reality is ours. They can't come in unless we invite them. When they do come in, they will do what they do best, which is to achieve their own objectives. Most people don't realize that Britain at one time took a loan from the IMF and they almost bankrupted the country. Why not? Why should they care about you? Where do you start up with this assumption that they are our salvation? Why should they be? I mean, I just don't understand it. The only way you can think that way is if your mind is colonized. Because they will come and help you. Why? Why would they? Why should they? And if someone out of your country is going to come and help you, that means that you've lost your own agency, so you cannot help yourself. So I'm sorry, we can go up, we can go down, we can go sideways. It comes back to the same issue. What is your concept of reality? And how do you see yourself? When we talk about money, do most of us realize that the biggest illusion is money? It doesn't exist. We decide that a piece of paper has value. That's all. Currencies have gone up the gold standard decades ago. The piece of paper in your pocket is meaningless unless and until you infuse it with meaning. In fact, the vast majority of money in the world right now is digital. It's not even physical. You got alert, you get alert, you get alert. Alert is what? 01100 is a digital number. It's not physical cash. And its only value is because we agree that it has value. So again, these things do not exist independent of us. They exist because we create it. So the perception that we need a loan 9 out of 10 times is because we have chosen not to organize our affairs in such a way that we can create the illusion ourselves of money. Let me give you one clear example of what I'm talking about. Right now, in our fair country, Nigeria, the Nigerian government officially has approximately 15 to 16 different exchange rates. We have an exchange rate for if you are traveling. We have an exchange rate for school fees. We have an exchange rate for people who are going to the Hajj. We have an exchange rate for people who are going to pilgrimage to Rome or to Israel. We have an exchange rate for industry, if you're going to import manufacturing. You have 16 different exchange rates. Pause. If you have 16 different exchange rates, it would be idiotic not to expect people to play arbitrage. Why wouldn't I? If I can get the official exchange at, pick a number, 200 Naira, and I can sell it at 500 Naira, why would I not do that? What, out of deep felt Christian charity? This is nonsense. Who created those 16 different exchange rates? We did. We did. So again, what are we talking about? What is the surprise? You look, stop that nonsense. We have the ability to do that today. To say there's one exchange rate. And all of a sudden, all that arbitrage business goes away. We have chosen not to do it. It's our choice. So look, I don't like, look, the only value of this kind of conversation is if we're truthful to ourselves. So we should stop deluding ourselves. This is the way what we are experiencing, what we're saying, is how we have chosen to live our lives. You don't like the road in GRA, you don't like the road in where you live, you don't like the lack of water. Who's going to change that? They? Who's they? Get angry. Get engaged. So there is no way we're going to move forward unless we engage with our minds and we learn, as I said, to take back agency, to know that we are responsible, and we do that third thing that I mentioned, which is that we cooperate. So you quoted Achebe, who I think was just a sage. He was a wonderful man. And you quoted his very famous book, Things Fall Apart. And he said, oh, the white man has put a knife between the things that held us together, and we are falling apart. Let me tell you one little example about the nature of colonialism and the power that it has when it sits in your mind. My grandfather was a reverend gentleman. My father is a reverend gentleman. So I grew up in a seminary. So a lot of my thought processes were formed in that kind of setting. And it's fascinating to me. Can people remember what is one of the first powers that God gave Adam? He gave him the power to name things. Give the power to name things. If you remember what I said about John, where in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word became flesh. So clearly, the Yoruba concept of ashe, of actually uttering something, of speaking and creating because you spoke, is reflected in the scriptures. So, the nature of language is very dangerous because language is a social cultural phenomenon. A language does not exist outside of the society and the culture from which it derived. This is why Esperanto failed. The attempt by the UN in the 60s to create an international language failed because it was just words and it had no cultural milieu to knit it together. So right now we are speaking because we need to communicate, because we all come from different parts of Nigeria. We are speaking in English. Now, my mother was a professor of English, but I am painfully conscious of the fact that I'm speaking a language that evolved out of a social culture that was negative to me. I'm painfully conscious that I'm speaking a language that comes from people whose society hate me. So what do I mean by that? If you think about the English language, everything black is bad, and then I am called black. So it's a simple correlation. Everything bad is black, and then I am called black. So black day, black leg, black male.
Black sheep.
Black sheep. So I'm speaking a language that is violent to me. So one of the simple examples, because you were talking about Chinua Achebe, about the knife and things fall apart. Well, one of the simple examples of how devious colonialism is when it sits in your mind is a word that we all use. And I urge all of us, I beg all of us to reflect on what I'm about to say and to change, to fundamentally change what we do, is the word tribe. We even had it in our original Independent song, national anthem. Now, do you know how many Welsh there are? Under 3.1 million people in Wales. You know how many Scots there are? Around 5.5 million Scots. The English themselves are only around 50, 55, 57 million people. In Nigeria alone, there are between 34 to 37 million Yorubas. In Nigeria alone. The English language refers to the Welsh and the Scots and the English as people, and referred to the Yorubas as a tribe. Go and look in the dictionary. The word tribe is a denigration. It means unsophisticated. It means primitive. It means a small band of almost gatherer hunters. And then we, in our dialogue, even putting the national anthem, we refer to ourselves as tribes. It's messed up your mind. Because in that process, you are denigrating a different ethnic group. And the focus is on division. And this is what has been built into the language that we are speaking. So we really have to, I cannot overemphasize what colonialism means. Colonialism, as I said, starts with cohesion, cannot be sustained by cohesion. It must sit in your mind. And the only way you can pull it out is for you to be conscious of it. So we should stop referring to ourselves as tribes. We're ethnic groups. I mean, the Yorubas were doing things when the British were still in caves. Why would you allow yourself to be called a tribe? The Benin Empire's earthwork, the Benin moat, is more extensive than the Great Wall of China. Why would you call yourself a tribe? I don't understand it. Why would you do that to yourself? And tell your children that? And do it multi-generational. Why would you do that? It's remarkable. So these are the issues we need to wrestle with. It's all in our mind, and we need to get a handle on it.
I think you have to do a course on this, the nature of reality, to be taught in our business schools, universities, and if possible, churches, and LBS. And I think we need to really, because the Bible says, be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. And this is really what you've spoken to. And if the mind is not that renewed, you can't even start. I think we need to begin to take some questions from the members of the tribe.
You know that I would not use that word. I talk about the empire. Then it matters. Oh, by the way, there's this lovely book by a late Professor Sophia called Orunmila and Socrates. I don't know whether anyone has come across this book. It's an amazing book. And it's an amazing book. If you can find it, please look for it. It's fantastic. And let me just say two things about it. You know, just since in terms of what you just said, Ituah. This lady was a professor at University of Ibadan. Just to show you how effective the paradigm is, how effective colonialism can be, what it happens to your mind. So when I mention Socrates, every sophisticated, highly educated person on this phone, on this call, of course, knows Socrates. He was, great philosopher, great philosopher. Do you know what most of us do not pause and reflect on? The only thing we know about Socrates, the only thing we know about him was as a result of a play that his student, Plato, wrote. The only information on Socrates is from a play. And this is the basis of Western philosophy. Orumula, we have all the Ode of Ifa. We have infinitely more information on Orumula than we have on Socrates. More philosophy, more history, more mathematics, more physics. And yet we are convinced, we have been convinced, we believe that Orumila and Ifa are irrelevant, and actually not only irrelevant, evil. But Socrates, yeah, I'm a sophisticated guy, yeah, Socrates. Western culture is so fascinating. They trace their civilization, their philosophical framework to the Greek. What they don't tell you is that the Greek trace their civilization and culture to the Africans who ran Egypt. That's where they went to school. So it's all about what is happening in your mind. And if I can convince you that Socrates has more validity than Orumila, you would naturally value Socrates and denigrate Orumila. We need to pause and reflect on ourselves.
That's good. I think somebody has posted that book, Socrates and Orumila. Something about, yeah. Who is the author again?
Professor Sophia
Oluwole.
Bosede Oluwole. Yes, and she spoke about this. There are a lot of internet, YouTube videos of her. She was a freaking genius. I think that book should be a standard book in every high school in Nigeria because it's very well written, very deep philosophical, and it's the kind of dialogue that we need to start pulling out the colonialism that is sitting in our minds.
Yeah, a lot of work needs to be done. I don't know if there are any people who would like to ask some questions. They can raise their hands electronically. Kofo Koka, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question very, very quickly? I think Kofo lives in the US or so. Yeah, go ahead, Kofo.
Good afternoon. If you permit me, I actually have two questions. The first one is, do you think that our social institutions can play an active role in creating a new reality? And in my list of social institutions, I included family groups, our town and ethnic group associations. We have Egbeomo Yoruba, Igbo town associations, and etc. Religious organizations, Nollywood, and media houses. And I was actually thinking about language before you mentioned language, and I'm so glad that you did. My second question is, do you think that we ought to increase the number of official languages in Nigeria to include Nigerian languages as a way of, fine-tuning our real reality? Thank you.
Thank you, Kofo. Both questions are great. As for the first one, absolutely. As I said, it's an across-the-board effort. So every institution that we're involved with has to be engaged in making this change. And I cannot overemphasize, just cannot overemphasize the power of the cultural and literary world, most dictators, who do they hate the most? It's the authors, it's the musicians, it's the writers. Almost every military regime has hated Wole Soyinka and hounded him at one stage or the other. Why? He doesn't carry a gun. He has something that is even more powerful, the ability to express an idea and to convince you of that idea. Ideas are like, I hate to use the word, they're like viruses, you know, they multiply. So every institution is important, and our cultural institutions, I'm glad that you mentioned Nollywood. The way most Americans ever understood Africa or Africans was through Hollywood. And the way most Africans understand African Americans is through Hollywood. So we're looking at ourselves through a distorted lens that is created by someone that is hostile to us. How does that make sense? So you're absolutely right. Every institution is important. You mentioned Nollywood, that is absolutely crucial. As to the languages, I could be wrong, but my recollection was that we actually have 4 official languages in Nigeria. It's just that we only use one. I believe that officially, Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa are also languages, but we only use one. We only use English. And it does matter what you say in which language, because the way I think in Yoruba or Edo is different from the way I would think in English. So I think it's a good idea. And I think we should have it as a compulsory course. I think that in every school in Nigeria, from primary school, everyone must learn a language other than English. And I don't care what language it is. My father is Benin, my mother is Yoruba. My parents didn't care which language we learned. But understanding the Nigerian language affects the way your mind thinks. And I think that is important.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question from Shade Fashidemi. Please unmute yourself, Shade, and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Pastor Ituah, for taking this question. I'd like to build on what Kofo mentioned about the languages. And I remember when we were in high school, in the federal government colleges, whether it was the girls or the mixed colleges, we had something called Wazobia. And in that, we had to learn all the 3 languages of Nigeria up until we got to Form 3. So the Hausa students that came all the way from the north would have to learn a little bit of Igbo, a little bit of Yoruba. The same thing with the Yoruba Empire children. We had to learn a little bit of Igbo and Hausa, and the same thing too with the Igbos. So by the time we all got to Form 3, everybody had a basic ability to communicate and understand all 3 language and the culture around it. Unfortunately, the minorities were left behind, so they could only be covered by the Pidgin English, which was Creole, and went all the way across, you know, and it was negatively allocated to the slave trade legacy. So it wasn't really popular or allowed to be something that we aspired for strictly because it was the language of the comeback slaves, you see. Yeah. So at some point in time, it would be helpful to incorporate that into this new mindset, this new mind frame that is happening. In South Africa, part of the restructuring of the nation, they incorporated what was called the 14 African languages. So they adopted officially either 14 or 11 languages. So it included the language of the oppressor, it included the English language, or it included all the Ogoni languages and the local traditional languages that represented every tribe of the South African nation. So that could be a transition for us as well, to say we're going to adopt a couple of languages. However, of course, it's not realistic to try and translate every official document into a multiple, into that number. However, it incorporated the mindset of being local and being strong.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, that's more like a comment. Emmanuel Mock, my good friend, has I'm sure, is it a comment or a question? Please go ahead, Emmanuel, unmute yourself. Emmanuel. Okay, maybe Emmanuel is trying to learn a new language.
Funny, while we're waiting on the language issue, there are a lot of issues with what Kagame has done in Rwanda, a lot of issues. But one thing that I think not enough people are aware of, and I think is actually the most profound thing he has done, he changed the language of the country. Rwanda was French. And when he took over, he said the Belgians and the French collaborated in the genocide, and I'm going to reject their culture. And he changed the language of the country to English. Profound. And it just goes to show you the power of language, how it can affect your mind. So I am much more concerned with all of our children speaking at least one Nigerian language than I am about whether all the official documents are in different languages. I think the more important thing is that if they speak at least one Nigerian language, the Wazobia example that Shade gave, I thought was fantastic. I mean, think about it. We did things structurally. Youth Corps was a brilliant idea. This Wazobia we did things structurally that would bring us together as a nation. And even those things, in many instances, have become degenerated, which is unfortunate.
Very, very unfortunate. Samuel Dada, we'll just take one or two more questions so that we can begin to close.
Okay, sir.
Yes, Samuel, go ahead.
Yeah. Happy New Year, sir. Thank you, sir, for the good work you are doing. Sir, I wanted to ask a question on the word Nigeria, when you mentioned one Nigeria. From what you have explained so far, that I so much believe in what you have said so far, that nobody is a Nigerian. How do you think? Because when you started, you said, I think we should go, we are just taking things from the surface in Nigeria. We've not gone deep. And when most of our leaders had never thought of this, which I believe so, because if looking at the present situation we find ourselves now, we're talking of divisions and tribes and all those languages they use, that we grown up with. Has anybody identified himself as a Nigerian? And who are Nigerian? Where were we before the name Nigerian were given to us? I don't know if you abide with me that nobody is a Nigerian, because before you can be a citizen of a country, you must be identified with a particular language, where you fall to, where you belong to. But in the case of Nigeria, we're given English as a language, though you said we have majorly 4 languages, which is not generally accepted. Because if I have to be a Yoruba man, if I have to go to Sokoto, if I don't speak their language over there, I may have problems with some people I met. It depends on the mind, like you said. But in the general terms of it, who is really the Nigerian, if that really exists as Nigerian? Thank you, sir.
Simple answer to that. We create our own reality. We can choose to become Nigerians. It's all a concept. I mean, who's an American? It's a meaningless word unless we choose to put meaning to it. So the fact that we have different ethnic groups and we speak different languages does not in any way, deprive us from the unique and I think glorious opportunity to be true Nigerians, which are people who have chosen to live with each other in a particular geography. Now, we need to do more to articulate what that means, but I have no objections to that. My parents, as I said, my father is Benin, my mother is Yoruba. Both my brothers married Igbos. I've lived in the north, I've lived all over the country. I've been to every country, every state in Nigeria by road except Sokoto. So I view myself as a Nigerian. I would not deny my Yoruba roots, nor will I deny my Edo roots. And so my comfort zone is that I am from this amazing country that we call Nigeria. But I think more of us need to think through it and identify and choose to become Nigerians. And then let's flesh out what that actually means.
He's married to a Cameroonian.
Oh yes, I'm married to a Cameroonian. So we keep on going east. In my family, we keep on going east.
They keep on going east. They wanted to go and colonize Cameroon, but they didn't agree.
But Ituah, as you know, part of Cameroon was part of Nigeria. So these are all artificial boundaries that people outside of the continent imposed on us.
In fact, somebody on this platform said about a year ago that we should take on Cameroon and add to Nigeria, take on Togo, take on Dahomey, even try the Ghanaians and take on Niger and build a bigger nation of some sort that can work together with a bigger fist or something. Somebody did recommend that. I think we'll try and bring this to a close. And I have 3 questions for you to answer, and then you can have your closing comments. Please give a lot of my warmest regards, and I want to thank her for looking after you and keeping you on the straight and narrow.
Which is difficult.
I think she did a phenomenal job. And thank you for this really deep, I mean, this is one of the deepest sessions that we've had, and the philosophy is extremely intriguing. And if a lot of more of our leaders could hear this and change their thinking and unite more against a common enemy than fractionalizing a great country with immense resource, I think would go a long way. But the 3 questions I have for you is this. You spend quite a lot of your time now outside of Nigeria in terms of professional career and things. What can Nigerians or Africans outside of Nigeria in the diaspora do to support or to engage or to help the efforts to really change the thinking, change the philosophy, and change the attitude of Nigeria? I know that the Indians have done a lot for India. The Chinese outside China have done a lot for China, and so on and so forth. And that, so what's your thinking, and what are you out there doing to help and to you are not in Nigeria, but you are part of Nigeria, and you must think. Number 2, what are the different, number 2, would you run for office in Nigeria? Would you run for office? And what office would you run for? Have you thought about that? And then number 3, if you were president of Nigeria, what are the 3, 4, 5, 6 things that you would do and put in this country to help to begin to take us on the trajectory that we should go? So I think do I need to repeat myself? Or
no, I got it. I got it.
You got the questions, and then you can give your parting comments, and then we will close.
Okay, great. So on the diaspora issue, I like to talk in present and past tense. Already, again, most Nigerians don't know this. Do you know the second largest source of hard currency for Nigeria after oil?
As foreign remittances.
Correct. There are estimates that put it between $20 to $36 billion a year. Holy cow. Holy cow. I mean, Nigerians in diaspora are providing more than 50% of the oil revenue. It reminds me of the story of Joseph. So we're all Josephs, who was sold into slavery by his brothers and who ended up being a supporter and savior of the whole race. So Nigerians in diaspora, current and past tense, are already doing a tremendous amount. And they're doing it at the monies that they are sending back into the country, which helps support the currency. In fact, when India floated the rupee, the only thing that allowed it to survive were Indians in diaspora who were still sending money back to the country. So Nigerians in diaspora are already engaged. The second thing, this is of an age. So Nigerians of a certain age who did their secondary school or did their first degree in Nigeria and then who went abroad, emotionally are still completely rooted in Nigeria. And that is part of why you see that huge amount of foreign remittance coming in. So I think there's a fair amount of work that is already being done, and there are pretty active associations here. My only concern is that too many of those associations are ethnic and are focused on more of division than unity. So I think there's still work to be done there. But I think that as you know, that interaction is good. Nigeria's coming back and forth, and that is very good interaction. And I think that we should expect more of that to happen. I think the language is important. There is there's a book that I love. I don't believe, again, back to the issue of words. There is a book, an academic book, that has over 5,200 Yoruba philosophical perspectives in it. Notice my use of words. I called it philosophical perspectives. I didn't call it proverbs. Because, again, the word proverb reduces what it really is. Funny or upon any wake up. You know, there's a lot of depth in this. It's our philosophy. It's the way we articulated our philosophy. We didn't write lengthy treatise, but we articulated it in these very dense, very deep thoughts. That's why you have an academic book with 5,200 of it. I mean, that is philosophy. Well, that piece of work, for example, was not done at the University of Ife, or at the University of Ibadan, or at the University of Lagos. It was actually done at the University of Nebraska by a Nigerian professor, but it was 100% funded by a white couple. So I only say that to say, I'm interested in knowledge and insight any way we can get it. Nigerians in diaspora are already leaders in almost every facet that they're engaged in outside of the country. We need to make sure that that interaction continues, and hopefully it continues more towards a unified view of Nigeria and not so much on an ethnic basis. As a public office, Ituah, you are the one that brought up my dear wife. When I proposed to my dear wife, it took her a couple of days to agree. And the issue we were negotiating was whether I would ever run for public office. And she made it a precondition of marriage that I would never run for public office. So, so she knew my passion then, and she knows my passion now. So I am prevented from doing that. But having said that, actually, I do think that the most important elected office in Nigeria, and I think the most powerful elected office in Nigeria, is actually not the presidency. I think the most powerful elected office in Nigeria is the governor of a state. Most Nigerians don't focus on the fact that the federal government has no land other than Abuja and whatever land the federal parastatals have. But the vast majority of the land in Nigeria, over 90%, are vested under the law in allodial ownership in the governorship of the states. And most governors in most states have a very, politically, the way our system works, have a good grasp of their legislature. So if you really wanted to do something in a very short period of time and make a big difference, I would say the most powerful elected political position would be governor of a state. I think chairmen of local governments can also do something. But let's be clear, let's be crystal clear on this. Let's be crystal clear on this. Please don't believe the canard, the lie, the silliness that only Lagos is the only viable state in Nigeria. Lagos is the smallest state in Nigeria, the smallest. Every single state in Nigeria is economically viable. Every single state has the most valuable thing, which are its people. The governors have the right with the legislature to pass legislation. They have the right for taxation. And every state has natural resources. Every single state is viable. We choose not to maximize that. Is it easier for me to sit on my posterior, collect a remnant of a military rule, which is this security, which is silly? What the heck is that? An amount you don't have to account for, and wait for a subsidy from the federal government and use 90% of it to employ staff, and so I can throw my hands up and say there's nothing else I can do? Absolute nonsense. So in my view, the most powerful political office is that of the executive governor. Few of them are maximizing it. If I was president, I probably would do two things. One, policy. The second one, is very practical. Policy, the colonial structure that we inherited concentrated power. Remember the history of Nigeria. We started as a colony in 1914 during the amalgamation. So it was a unitary political structure and a unitary economic structure, because that's what worked in colonialism. We then went to a confederation with 3 regions. Confederation. We then went to 5 regions. And then we went into a federation with 12 states, 19 states, and where we are now in 36. My view is that the remnant of the colonial structure is the federal government. We did a horrible thing at independence, something known as the omnibus provision. In the euphoria of independence, we passed a law that said this really most offensive colonial laws were ending, but all other laws will stay in place. And where you see British Crown, we will substitute federal government of Nigeria. It is that nonsense that we did that led to this bizarre situation where oil revenues goes to the federal government, because there was something known as the Crown's Minerals Act. And the Crown Minerals Act said, which made sense in a colonial structure, said that all minerals in Nigeria, in the colony, whether discovered or otherwise, belong to the British Crown. That makes perfect sense in the colonial structure. But when you substitute federal government to British Crown, it doesn't make any sense at all. Why should all the minerals, it's a colonial structure, why should it all go to the federal government? So what I would do if I was president is, we need to continue to devolve from the federal to the states and to the local governments, because they're the ones that interact with the people of Nigeria. Every Nigerian comes from one local government and from a state. Who comes from the federal government? There's no such thing. So we need to move that authority down to the states and to the local governments, because they are the ones that are closer to the people. And they are the ones that are more likely than not to provide the kind of resources and support that the people need. So that's the policy one. The very practical one, civilizations are rated by the level of energy consumption. Let me explain. If your civilization is a high civilization, you consume more energy. If your civilization is a low civilization, you consume less energy. Less than 24% of our fellow Nigerians have access to constant electricity. It is idiotic. The single greatest multiplier of GDP value is electricity, constant electricity. What we've spent on generators in Nigeria is obscene. It makes you want to puke. In my view, we need constant electricity. If we do that, that factor alone will quadruple, will turbocharge our GDP. You've heard of huge amounts of monies that have been associated with our electricity efforts. Fine, sunk cost. Let's look forward. Let's figure out how to make sure that what we've already done in the process of getting government out of the everyday aspect of electricity, let's move forward on making sure that the private companies that we've got, whatever we've done, that we make it actually work. Because if we can get constant electricity, it will be a huge, direct, positive impact on every aspect of every Nigerian's life. And it will free up capital that, instead of spending it on generator and diesel, that will allow us to invest in doing other things. So policy-wise, I will move more authority to the states and the local governments. If I'm going to do one single thing, it will be energy, it will be electricity. And we are fortunate because we can leapfrog technology, because every world is going to green energy now. We have all the green energy. We are 2 degrees off the equator. So we have a star right on top of us. So we have every form of green energy available. And I would urge us to really consider that. So those are the 2 things I would do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I must really let you go and let everybody else go. These 2 things have been perhaps the most difficult thing to do in Nigeria by successive governments who've even promised to do them. And then by the time they get to the federal Aso Rock or wherever it is, they don't do it again. Last question, why don't they? They've all promised to do it. Obasanjo said he was going to give us electricity, spend money on it. Nothing happened. This devolution of power or economic to the states is the big argument all over the place, plus and including even now state police. Why don't they do this changing of this Crowns Minerals Act that somehow sneaked itself into our constitution?
All right, Ituah, let me respond to that, and which is the end of this, by pointing out 2 or 3 things. Number 1, today, there are 26 human beings in the world, 26, who have more wealth than 3.8 billion other human beings. There are only 7 odd billion of us in the whole species. So in effect, 26 people have more wealth than half the human species. Now, most people say, hey, that's horrible, inequality. But when I saw that data, Yorubas mean what your eye is looking for is what the eye sees. What I saw was not the inequality. Do you know what I saw? I asked myself the question, these 26 people, how did they make their money? And you know what the answer was? Every single one of them, intellectual property.
Is
So
my name
believe it or
among
not-
the 26?
I saw that you hid your name, Ituah. I saw that you hid your name. They made their money from the product of the human mind. They made their money from the product of the human mind. So I go back to where I started. It's what we choose. It's the way you see yourself. Just think about this. Babangida was president of Nigeria for several years. According to Forbes, the maximum amount of net worth they could ascribe to him was around $6 billion. Abacha was president of Nigeria for a period of time. According to Forbes, the maximum amount they could ascribe to him was around $4 billion. Mobutu Sese Seko was president of Zaire. And just remember, at that time, Zaire was the largest landmass country in Africa, had a landmass larger than Western Europe. The maximum they could ascribe to him was $4 billion. All three men were military, got into power through the use of force. A lot of people died under their regimes. They had ultimate power. That small boy, Bill Gates, current net worth is just over $70 billion. That small boy, Elon Musk, current net worth is just under 200 billion. Bezos, current net worth is just under 200 billion. Those three never had military positions, never had government positions, never had the power to tax, never had the power to pass laws. If Bezos wrote a check for $19 billion, which was the total net worth of Babangida, Abacha, and Mobutu, he will still remain one of the richest men in the world. So you ask me the question, why do they do it? It's the lack of imagination. Do they think this is wealth? They think this is big manism? Really? Really? Are you serious? As I said, Apple has a $3 trillion market cap. What's making you happy? The only way you make real money in the 21st century is by unleashing the minds of your people. Not one of those 26 people that I just mentioned made their wealth from gold or oil or gas or diamond. Think about it. The only reason gold, diamond, oil is important is because it's limited. The reason these guys are so rich is because they are doing the product of the mind, which is unlimited. There are 2.5 billion people on Facebook. That is a third of the human species. You think if Facebook got another 1%, does it reduce the value or increase the value? If another billion people join Facebook, does it reduce the value or increase the value? I'm making yourself happy. Over what? How much? Please. They don't understand. And this is the point I keep on saying. If money is important to you, then pursue things that come out of the human mind. That's the unlimited value creation. Everything else is limited. So somehow we need to either get people into positions of authority. Notice I didn't call them leaders. People in positions of authority, because leadership means that you are doing something for your people. Position of authority means they're just in a position of authority. We need to find people into leadership who actually understand that if they want to do very well, my God, take care of your people, unleash that power, and you will be shocked what it does for you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good way to close. So I'm talking to our leaders today and those aspiring to leadership 2023. Take care of your people, starting with me. And then you'll be shocked. Take care of your people. Take care of your people. Educate them. Transform their minds. Stop making them pull cattle and wasting time. That's an Elon Musk pulling cattle from Sokoto. That's why you didn't go to Sokoto, because they will pull cattle. You know, take care of your people, and the rest will take care of itself. What Fela is saying is that that oil that we're all struggling for is nothing. It's nothing. It's finite. If the job people want it, let them have it and let them keep doing it. But get the Hausa man, get the Yoruba man, get the Edo man to think and become one of the 26 people. He has more power in his mind than the oil underneath the ground. Let them have it. Then let the others think and think through and think more than the oil can ever give us. Thank you very much, my brother. We will be asking you to come back again very soon, where we'll then be looking at the double nature of reality. And then we'll be voting you for president.
No.
Is it like, yeah, I'm going to come and beg her that,
no, I love my wife. I cannot laugh.
Your wife loves us too. She loves Nigeria.
Well,
okay.
Thank you for finding the time. I'm sorry I bored you so much, but
no. The comments are fantastic. It's really opened a lot of our minds. Thank you so much for allowing God to give you so much knowledge and wisdom. Have a wonderful year. And when next you're around the block, please let's have a tea, coffee, dinner together or something. God bless you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for coming. God bless you. Happy New Year to you. I think this has been a remarkable session. I do hope that we'll have greater sessions this new year. We're really starting this movement now, very strong, very powerful. Very soon, we're going to publish the bank accounts and the things that we'll be doing. And all the people who have chosen to volunteer to be part of it, please get ready to begin to do some really great things. We must try to make sure we have the right people in authority and in leadership in Nigeria. And that's one of the things we're going to be struggling to do on this platform. Thank you very much. God bless you. Watch the space. A lot more will be coming through. God bless you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pastor Ighodalo.
Thank you.
Awesome.